The briefing room at FOB Kestrel smelled like burnt coffee and old arguments. 12 men sat in plastic chairs arranged in rows. One woman stood in the back, arms folded, watching the overhead projector cast light across a map of Sector 9. Nobody had offered her a seat. Staff Sergeant Jordan Price had stopped expecting courtesy 14 months ago. What she expected now was the mission, the map, the math. Everything else was noise. The noise in this particular room had been loud since she arrived. "They sent us Iron Wolf," someone had muttered when she walked in. "A ranger. Big shoulders, bigger mouth." He'd said it the way you say, "Of course they did." The kind of voice that expects agreement. He got it from 3 chairs. Iron Wolf. Her call sign. She'd earned it in Mosul in 2019. A shot across 800 meters in a 40-knot crosswind that saved a 4-vehicle convoy and killed the sniper who'd already tagged 2 American drivers. The call sign was a compliment. The tone it got delivered in tonight was not. Jordan hadn't responded. She'd set down her rifle case, opened her notebook, and started mapping grid references. The SEAL commander at the front of the room was Lieutenant Commander David Okafor. Nigerian father, Georgia mother, 22 years of service written into the lines around his eyes. He hadn't acknowledged her arrival either, which wasn't rudeness. It was focus. She understood the distinction. The mission briefing was already 40 minutes deep. Sector 9 primary compound. Okafor said, laser pointer tracing a compound of 4 buildings. "We have 11 hostages. 7 American aid workers, 4 journalists. Enemy forces number approximately 35. These are not militia. They're trained, coordinated, and they have been expecting some form of response. Rules of engagement: the ranger with the big shoulders. Sergeant First Class Ray Colton. Restrictive. Command wants minimal signature. Political coordination ongoing with local government. We go in quiet, we bring them out quiet. How long has command been coordinating?" Okafor's jaw tightened. 16 days. 16 days. Jordan did the math without being asked. 16 days of hostages in a compound guarded by 35 trained fighters. 16 days of being told that negotiation was progressing. 16 days of hands tied, while people suffered inside 4 walls on a map. "We move in 4 hours, Okafor said. Alpha element breaches the eastern compound wall. Bravo element covers the northern approach. Sniper overwatch will be positioned on grid 7 kilo before breach." Every eye in the room moved to Jordan. Then most of them moved away, which was almost worse. Grid 7 kilo was a demolished textile factory, 5 stories of sun-bleached concrete and bad memories. Jordan reached it 90 minutes before the breach. She moved through the shadow, through rubble that shifted underfoot, up stairwells that smelled like smoke and abandonment. She'd scouted this position from satellite imagery 3 hours ago. The real thing was always different. She adjusted, improvised, found the angle that the satellite couldn't tell her about, a gap in the collapsed 4th-floor roof that gave her a clear sight line across 710 meters of open ground to the compound's northeastern wall. She set up her 21 Malawian Quachas with practice silence. Bipod legs, suppressor threaded and locked. Thermal optic calibrated to ambient temperature, which was 91 degrees Fahrenheit at 2,200 hours because the desert didn't care about comfort. Magazine seated. 1 round chambered. 14 total. Jordan settled behind the glass and began reading the battlefield. 31 fighters visible. 32. She marked patrol patterns in her notebook. Timing. Intervals. The eastern wall had a guard rotation every 6 minutes. The northern gate had 2 static sentries and a third who paced, restless, probably new. The nervous ones were always the most dangerous. They flinched. They fired at shadows. Her radio earpiece carried the mission frequency. Okafor's voice, Alpha element, Bravo element. The cadence of men preparing to move. Then a second frequency crackled in. Command frequency. Different voices. Further away. Jordan kept listening. She always kept listening. "State Department is requesting we hold the breach," a voice said. Clipped. Administrative. "Negotiations have entered a critical phase." Okafor's voice, controlled, very controlled. "Sir, we have a 20-minute breach window based on patrol patterns. If we hold, we lose it. Understood. Hold position. Confirmation coming. Jordan watched the compound through her scope. Watched a fighter carry a metal chair into the central courtyard. Watched two others follow, carrying items she couldn't fully identify at this distance. Rope and a wooden frame. She identified them. The negotiations had entered a critical phase. The other side had entered a different phase entirely. Commander. Jordan kept her voice low and level. Iron Wolf to command element. I have visual on what appears to be preparation for an execution in the central courtyard. Two fighters constructing a frame. Request immediate assessment. Silence on the frequency. Then, Iron Wolf. Maintain observation. Do not engage. Await orders. Jordan watched. The frame took shape. The chair was positioned in front of it. Commander, I have positive ID on the frame. This is not a drill. They're moving someone from the eastern building. The figure was small, moving slowly, hands behind the back. Command, this is Okafor. His voice had changed. The controlled tone was still there, but there was iron underneath now. I'm requesting immediate authorization to breach. Intel suggests imminent threat to hostage life. Standby, Commander. State Department is. I don't have standby, sir. I have 60 seconds. More silence. The kind of silence that costs people their lives while men in climate-controlled rooms calculate political weight. Jordan's crosshairs were already moving. Not to the hostage. To the fighters. She did not have authorization to engage. She began the calculation anyway. The way a doctor calculates dosage before the prescription is written. Not committed. Not yet. Just ready. The figure in the courtyard was pushed into the chair. Jordan zoomed her optic. Young face. Female. One of the journalists. She was not broken. Her spine was straight, and her jaw was set, and she was looking at the frame in front of her with the expression of someone who had decided not to give them her fear. Jordan had that same expression every time she walked into a room full of men who'd already decided what she was worth. 30 seconds. Command, this is Okafor. I need an answer now. Commander, you are ordered to hold. I repeat, hold position. Do not breach. The political. Iron Wolf. Okafor's voice cut across the command frequency. Direct. Clear. No ambiguity. Sir, what's your assessment? Jordan looked at the courtyard. At the frame. At the young journalist who hadn't broken yet. At the fighter who was positioning himself 6 feet in front of her with a weapon in his hand. 10 seconds, Commander. A pause. Half a breath long. Iron Wolf sniper. Okafor's voice was quiet and absolute. You're up. The first shot happened before the command frequency could protest. 710 meters. Night air. Temperature differential between ground and elevation. Slight eastern drift. Jordan had been calculating for 11 minutes. The math was done. The fighter in the courtyard dropped. The weapon fell. The journalist screamed once and then went silent because soldiers were suddenly coming over the eastern wall and her survival instincts were smarter than her fear. Jordan was already moving to target 2. The guard on the northern gate, static post, west side. He'd raise his radio the moment the first shot landed. She couldn't let the call go out. 695 meters. Wind negligible. Second shot. The radio fell from his hand. Target 3. The eastern gate guard, running now, running toward the central courtyard, running toward the sound of breach. A moving target was harder. Jordan didn't find it hard. Third shot. The runner stopped. For seconds elapsed. Alpha element was through the eastern wall. She could hear Okafor's voice on the tactical frequency. Sharp, precise, commanding the breach with the efficiency of a man who'd done this in 6 countries. She could also hear the chaos beginning to organize in the compound. Fighters responding, taking positions. Target 4. A fighter climbing to an elevated position on the eastern building's roof with an RPG. That RPG, aimed at Alpha Element's approach vector, was a catastrophe. It was also 680 meters away and partially concealed behind a water tank. Jordan waited. The fighter shifted left to get a better angle. Fourth shot. The RPG clattered across the rooftop, unfired. 8 seconds elapsed. Iron Wolf. We have fighters pushing from the secondary building. Okafor said through the tactical channel. No panic, just information delivered the way good commanders delivered it. Northern approach, getting crowded. Jordan was already scanning north for fighters using a vehicle as cover, moving toward Bravo element's position. Good cover. Not perfect. Fifth shot, the lead fighter's ankle visible below the vehicle's chassis. He went down. The others broke formation. Sixth shot, a fighter who'd moved from cover to drag his teammate. Seventh shot, a fighter repositioning toward the primary building entrance where hostages were held. 14 seconds elapsed. She was breathing at 44 beats per minute. The comm had arrived the moment Okafor said her call sign. It always came when she stopped waiting for permission and started doing the work she'd been built to do. Inside the compound, Alpha Element had breached the primary building. Okafor's voice, first floor clear. Moving up, Bravo Element was holding the northern gate, suppressing the vehicle position where Jordan had scattered the fighters. Target 8, a fighter with a radio, third floor window of the secondary building. If reinforcements hadn't been called yet, Jordan intended to keep it that way. 8 shot. The window went dark. 21 seconds elapsed. She reloaded. Smooth. Automatic. Her hands knew this the way a pianist's hands knew scales. The compound was fracturing. No coordination. No leadership. Fighters were covering individual positions instead of reinforcing each other because every time someone moved toward a command role, toward a rally point, toward an elevated position, they dropped. An invisible hand was dismantling their ability to organize. Iron Wolf, Eastern Exterior. 2 fighters, secondary extraction point. Bravo Element Sergeant, a woman named Delgado who treated Jordan like a professional from the first handshake. Jordan found them. 9th shot. 10th shot. 29 seconds elapsed. Primary building, 2nd floor clear. Okafor reported. Contact with 4 hostages. Alive. Moving to 3rd. Alive. The word hit Jordan somewhere below her professional composure and above her ribcage. She pushed it down. For more shots in the magazine. Work left to do. Target 11. A fighter who'd climbed to the compound's southern wall, trying to get an angle on Alpha Element's exit route. This shot required Jordan to shift her entire position 3 feet to the left, exposing her slightly, accepting a narrower margin. She shifted. She accepted it. 11th shot. 3rd floor clear, Okafor said. All 11 hostages accounted for. Preparing to extract. 11. All 11. Jordan scanned the compound. The organized resistance was finished. Scattered fighters, some wounded, most taking cover and waiting for something to tell them what to do. Nobody was left to tell them. She counted her remaining rounds. 3. She kept them chambered. The extract was the most dangerous moment. Everyone knew it. The fighters who'd survived knew it too. Target 12 appeared the moment Alpha Element emerged from the primary building's ground floor entrance with hostages in tow. A fighter rising from a position behind a burned-out vehicle, 660 meters, direct line on the column. 12th shot. 47 seconds elapsed. Okafor's column moved with controlled urgency. 11 hostages, several barely walking, supported by operators who knew how to move people who'd forgotten how. Bravo Element fell in behind them. The eastern breach point was 40 meters away. The last 2 fighters who might have rallied either chose survival or were out of sight. 58 seconds. The column cleared the breach point. 63 seconds. Iron Wolf, we're clear, Okafor said. All personnel extracted. Confirm your status. Jordan kept her scope on the compound for another 90 seconds because clearing the objective meant nothing if a fighter moved toward the extract route before the column was beyond range. Nothing moved. Iron Wolf is secure, she said finally. 11 confirmed. 12 shots fired. Extraction route clear. Copy that. A pause. Then quietly, off-frequency protocol. Outstanding work, Sergeant. She began breaking down her rifle. Behind her, the desert night was silent. Ahead of her, 11 people were walking toward helicopters and home. The debrief happened at 0400 hours in a prefab room that smelled like recycled air and instant coffee. 13 people sat around a folding table. Okafor the head. Jordan across from Sergeant First Class Colton. who hadn't said anything directly to her since she walked in 5 hours ago. 12 rounds, the intelligence officer said, reading from his tablet. 12 confirmed eliminations. Patrol communication disrupted at the critical window. RPG, threat neutralized before deployment. Extraction route cleared of active threats. He looked up. This is a textbook Overwatch execution. Colton's jaw was working. Jordan watched him find words. She engaged before authorization, he said. Command had ordered hold. Okafor's eyes moved to Colton. Command ordered hold on the breach. The breach proceeded when I authorized it. She fired before you authorized the breach. She fired when I gave the order. The order she was given was clear. The command frequency. Sergeant Colton. Okafor's voice didn't rise. It didn't need to. I gave the order. If there is a question of authorization, it rests with me. Is that clear? A pause. Yes, sir. Good. Okafor looked at his team, looked at each face, stopped at Jordan's last. 11 Americans are alive tonight because every person in this room did their job. Some of us did it better than others. He wasn't looking away from Jordan when he said it. We're done here. Get some sleep. People filed out. Jordan was repacking her kit when Colton stopped at the door. She felt him stop before she heard him. Intuition built from years of being the person in a room that others watched sideways. Good shooting, Colton said. Flat. Direct. Not an apology. Maybe the beginning of one. Jordan looked up. Next time, offer me a chair. Colton held her gaze for a moment, then nodded once and left. The thing about being black and female in a combat role was that people made their minds up before you arrived. Jordan had understood this since her first day at sniper school when her instructor had looked at her qualification scores, looked at her, and said, "These can't be right." They were right. They were the highest in her class by 11 points. Confirmation bias. Her mother had said when Jordan called home from training, frustrated and exhausted and 22 years old. Her mother was a high school principal in Charlotte who'd spent 30 years walking into rooms where her authority was questioned before she'd spoken a word. They see what they expect to see. Your job is to make them see something different. How long does that take? Depends on how stubborn they are. Some of them come around. Some of them never do. You figure out which is which, and you don't waste time on the second kind. Jordan had carried that advice through 8 years of service, through 2 combat deployments, through 4 different units, where she'd had to prove herself from scratch each time because reputation didn't travel as fast as rumors did. She'd been in Delgado's company on her first deployment. Delgado, who shook hands and asked questions and evaluated people on evidence rather than assumption. There were more Delgados than Coltons in this work, more people who came around than never did, but the Coltons were louder and they left marks. She'd been passed over for a commendation after Mosul despite the official record being unambiguous. The reporting officer had noted in her file, demonstrates competence. Requires further evaluation for leadership potential. The male operator who'd done marginally less on the same mission received a Bronze Star recommendation. She'd filed a formal complaint. The complaint had been reviewed and filed. The reviewing officer had suggested she focus on her next assignment. Jordan had focused on her next assignment. Then the one after that. Then this one. She did not stop being angry. She learned to use anger the same way she used everything else. Fuel. Input. Information about what kind of room she was in. The commendation from Mosul had eventually come through, delayed 14 months, downgraded from the original recommendation. She'd received it without ceremony and put it in a drawer. The callsign Iron Wolf had come from the fighters who'd survived Mosul. Enemy fighters who'd radioed descriptions of an unseen shooter who moved through their formations like an invisible predator. The intercept had been translated and passed to American intelligence. Iron Wolf, a name given by people trying to describe something they couldn't see and couldn't stop. Jordan thought that was more honest than most official commendations. Lieutenant Commander Okafor found her at the flight line 2 hours before their transport out. She was sitting on her kit bag, notebook open, documenting the mission sequence while it was still clean and clear in her memory. He sat down beside her without asking, which she respected. He treated her like a peer, which was what she was. Colton's going to come around, Okafor said. He doesn't have to. No, but he will. He's not a bad soldier. He's got some unlearning to do. Jordan looked up from her notebook. You gave me the order knowing command had put a hold on engagement. Yes, that's a career risk. Sergeant Price. Okafor turned to look at her directly. 11 people were going to die on a political schedule. You had the shot. I made the call. The risk calculus was straightforward. Command won't see it that way. Command sees what's in the after-action report. My name is on the authorization for the engagement order. That's what happened. He paused. What I'm more interested in is what else happened. Jordan waited. When I said your call sign, you were already in the sequence. It wasn't a question, so she didn't make it an answer. The target presented. I know what the target did. I know when you fired relative to when I gave the order. He looked at her evenly. You'd already done the calculation. You'd already decided. Jordan was quiet for a moment. Honest people recognized honesty in others, which was a courtesy she extended to Okafor because he'd earned it. Yes, she said. I had. But you waited. You were the ranking officer. The decision was yours to make. And if I hadn't made it? A pause. The desert wind moved through the flight line. Somewhere, a generator hummed. Then I would have made it, Jordan said. And I would have owned the consequences. Okafor nodded slowly. He understood consequences. He'd made a career of understanding them. The after-action will reflect that I gave the authorization order, he said. That's the truth. It happened first. What's also true is that Iron Wolf provided exceptional Overwatch support, resulting in 0 casualties among American personnel and the successful extraction of 11 hostages. He stood, straightened. You'll be recommended for the Silver Star. Jordan looked at him. Will it come through? Okafor met her eyes. Something passed between them. A shared and unspoken understanding of how institutions worked, how they failed, how long things took, and what they cost people they were supposed to serve. I will make it very difficult for it not to, he said. He walked back toward the command tent. Jordan watched him go, then opened her notebook to a fresh page and began writing. The after-action report filed by Lieutenant Commander Okafor ran to 47 pages. It documented the mission timeline in precise detail, including the command frequency hold order, his own authorization for engagement, and the 12-shot sequence that had cleared the threat matrix in 63 seconds. He also documented, in an appendix, what had been said in the command center before the breach, the 16 days of failed negotiation, and the 3 separate occasions on which ground personnel had flagged imminent threat to hostage life and been told to stand by. The appendix was flagged as sensitive and reviewed by 3 separate officers before being allowed to stand. It stood. Okafor had made sure of that. The Silver Star recommendation was submitted on January 4th. It was reviewed, returned for additional documentation, resubmitted with 40 additional pages of supporting evidence, including ballistic reports, tactical logs, and 12 witness statements, re-reviewed, and approved on March 19th. Jordan received it in a ceremony with 14 other personnel. Small room, folding chairs, a general who shook her hand and moved quickly to the next recipient. Delgado had been there. She'd stood in the back and pumped her fist when Jordan's name was called, which was the most genuine response in the room. Colton had been there too. He'd stood with his unit. When Jordan walked past him after the ceremony, he'd extended his hand. She shook it. Your shooting saved my team's extraction route, he said. I should have said that in the debrief. Yes, Jordan said. You should have. He nodded. His jaw worked. He wasn't done, but he didn't have more words ready. Colton. Jordan held his gaze. Competence doesn't have a demographic. You've been in long enough to know that. He looked at her for a long moment. Something shifted in his face, something that had been held too rigid for too long. I'm working on it, he said. It wasn't enough. It was something. Jordan knew the difference and valued the second without pretending it was the first. She went to find Delgado. The bar was called The Reload. It was veteran-owned, Charlotte-based, the kind of place that put a framed photograph of the 82nd Airborne on the wall next to a menu that served good food without charging for the atmosphere. Jordan's mother sat across from her at a corner table. Her mother was 61 years old, had the posture of a woman who'd spent 30 years refusing to shrink in rooms that asked her to, and had ordered the grilled salmon without looking at the menu because she'd been here before and she knew what she wanted. Tell me the part where he said your call sign. Her mother said. Jordan had told the story from the beginning. The briefing room, the looks, the mission, the compound, the 11-second window before the journalist in the chair ran out of time. He said it like it was the only answer, Jordan said. Iron Wolf Sniper, you're up. Her mother was quiet for a moment. 16 days, she said. They let those people sit in that compound for 16 days. Negotiations. Negotiations. Her mother's expression carried a very specific kind of weight. The weight of a woman who'd watched institutions prioritize their own comfort for 61 years. And when the negotiations finished negotiating, who went in and got them out? We did. Who specifically? Jordan looked at her mother. I did. With a rifle you spent 8 years mastering. In a position you identified and held for 90 minutes before the breach. In a unit where you weren't offered a chair. Her mother picked up her water glass. How many of them thanked you properly? Okafor. Delgado. A few others. Colton. Jordan told her about the handshake. Her mother considered it. He's got a long way to go. Give him credit for starting. You're more generous than I am. No, her mother said. I've just had more practice of the math. You spend your energy on people worth spending it on. You document everything. You keep your record clean. And when a moment comes, you do your job so well that nobody in that room can pretend they didn't see it. She set down her glass. And then you call me and tell me about it. Jordan smiled. It came up easier than it used to. Some things loosen with time and the right audience. The Silver Star, her mother said. March 19th. Yes. And the recommendation was filed in January. Yes. Her mother nodded once. She understood the arithmetic without needing it explained. She'd spent 30 years receiving things in March that should have arrived in January. 11 people went home, she said. Yes. The journalist. The one in the chair. Do you know what happened to her? Jordan had followed up. She did these things quietly, after the fact, without expectation of acknowledgement. Back at her outlet. Filed a piece about the hostage experience, about the compound, about the extraction. Jordan paused. She asked about the shooter. She knew it was a sniper. She wrote that the first shot happened before she could process that anyone was coming for them. She wrote that it felt like something intervened. Her mother's eyes were bright. Something, she said softly. I'm not something. I'm a staff sergeant with a qualification rating. You're also my daughter. Her mother reached across the table and covered Jordan's hand with hers. And you have always known when an order was wrong. Since you were 8 years old, I told you to clean your room, and you very calmly explained that cleaning the room was less important than finishing the book chapter, because one of them had lasting value and one didn't. She smiled. I made you clean the room anyway. Good call. But I also knew you were right. Her mother squeezed her hand. The world needs people who do what's right when what's ordered is wrong. The world especially needs those people behind the scope when the clock runs out. 3 months after the extraction, a journalist from a national outlet filed a Freedom of Information request and obtained Okafor's after-action report, including the appendix documenting the 16 days of failed negotiation and the command frequency hold orders. The story ran on a Tuesday. By Wednesday, it was the third most-read piece on 3 separate news platforms. By Thursday, a congressional subcommittee had requested a briefing. The headline read, 11 hostages, 1 shooter, 16 days of delay. The story mentioned Iron Wolf by call sign only, protected by operational security. But within military circles, within veteran communities, within the networks of people who understood what call signs meant and how they were earned, the story moved fast. A corporal and admin, who happened to be Delgado's younger sister, texted Delgado a link to the article with a note. Is this who I think it is? Delgado texted back, don't ask me that. Then she sent Jordan the article with no note at all. Jordan read it in her quarters. Read it twice. The journalist had gotten most of it right, which was better than most. The piece did not mention that the shooter had been waiting in position for 90 minutes before the breach, which meant the shooter had made decisions before the authorization came. It did not examine what might have happened in the seconds before Okafor gave his order. It didn't need to. The people who mattered knew. She closed the article, opened her notebook, began the next entry in the sequence of documentation she'd been keeping since her first deployment, dates and facts and records, the architecture of a career built not on recognition, but on truth. At the top of the page, she wrote the date, the mission designation, and 12 words. 12 shots. 63 seconds. 11 people came home. This is enough. She paused, thought, added one line more. The chair was empty when we left the compound. That is the point. The next unit rotation brought new faces to FOB Kestrel. Jordan was part of the orientation brief, which was new, which was Okafor's doing. She stood at the front of the room and ran through Sector 9 threat assessment, current patrol patterns, sightline analysis for the 3 most likely Overwatch positions. She did not note that she'd earned the right to stand at this front of this room by proving it in a way that some of the men who doubted her would never have to. She didn't need to note it. The silver star was on her uniform. The after-action report was in the official record. And at the back of the room, a young specialist named Reyes, 23, first deployment, the only other woman in the unit, was writing everything down with the focused intensity of someone who had decided to learn from the best source available. After the briefing, Reyes approached. Nervous, deliberate, the courage of someone who'd made a decision and was carrying it through. Staff Sergeant Price, I've read everything available on Iron Wolf operations. I'm tracked for sniper qualification next cycle. I was hoping. Come find me at the range tomorrow at 0600, Jordan said. Bring your qualification targets from the last 2 months. Reyes's face went through surprise, and then resolve, and then something that looked like relief. Yes, Staff Sergeant. And Specialist. Jordan looked at her directly. The range doesn't care where you're from or what you look like. The bullet goes where the physics takes it. That's the only math that matters out there. Reyes nodded. She understood, or she would. 0600, Jordan said, and walked toward the door. Outside, the desert was cooling toward evening. In 11 different cities, 11 people who'd sat in a compound for 16 days were living their lives. A journalist was filing her next story. Aid workers had returned to their work. Families had received phone calls that didn't start with the words, "I'm sorry to inform you." Jordan stood for a moment in the open air, watching the sky shift from white to orange at the horizon. Somewhere in a Washington office, a congressional subcommittee was asking questions that needed to be asked about 16 days of delay and 1 night of 63 seconds. Somewhere in Charlotte, her mother was having dinner, and her phone would ring at 1900 hours, which was when Jordan called, always from wherever she was in the world. And somewhere in the compound, she'd cleared from a rooftop at 710 meters. The chair that had been placed in the courtyard was still standing, empty as it should be. That was the only commendation Iron Wolf had ever needed. The stars were beginning to show. Jordan went to call her mother.